What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be talking about a very wonderful series written by Hannah Whitten. If that sounds like something that you might enjoy and you're in the mood to talk about a nice little romantasy series, then definitely stick around for this video. It's reading time here at JB's Corner. For those of you that are new here, my name is Jaya, and here on this little corner of the internet, we talk all things books. I absolutely adore reading. I absolutely love books. I love audiobooks. I love physical books. I love, what other kind of books are there? Physical, audio, ebooks, all the different books. Any version of a book that I can get my hand on and enjoy reading, I am probably going to enjoy it. So I decided that the best way to share that passion and that love and that enjoyment for the world of reading is through the internet. And I have to say that the communities that I have found here that also equally love reading, the book clubs that I've experienced, all these things, it has been an absolute dream and joy. So without further ado, I wanted to talk to you guys about the series. So I also want to preface this by saying these are some of the most beautiful books I have ever seen. This is the cover of the Foxglove King. It is just absolutely stunning. Then we have Hemlock Queen, which is book number 2. And we have the Nightshade God. Now, if these covers themselves alone are not beautiful, just wait until I show you guys what the inside covers look like. These are probably the most beautiful books in my entire collection. I have to say they are absolutely stunning. They are chef's kiss gorgeous, and I enjoyed every single second of reading these beautiful masterpieces. Now, the premise of this series is basically that there are gods, and gods are currently missing or gone, but there is a prophecy that when the gods return, balance will be restored to the world. And so the world is preparing for the return of the gods. Now, that being said, there is currently a leak of death that is happening because of a dead, buried goddess that lives underground, and this body is consistently leaking mortem, or the power of death. The belief is that when the god Apollonius, the one true god, comes back, he will bring into presence light and beauty and basically chase away all of the darkness and the mortem and reunify everybody under one godhood, and peace will reign on earth. So that's kind of the background premises of the world. They are in a kingdom at the beginning of this book. Let me see if I can't find a map. I know one of the books had a map. Let me find it for you. Ah, yes. So this is the kingdom's map. Now within this map, you can see that the Auvergne clan is basically living right here. This is where the majority of the first book is taking place. In the second book, we see a little bit of Corinthia, as well as the introduction of Chaldean that starts to show up. And then the third book is primarily taking place in the Burnt Isles, which I don't know if we can see on here. Ah, yes. All of this dark stuff is the Burnt Isles. So the belief is that when the gods disappeared from the world eons ago, that when the major war happened between the god Apollonius, the god of light and sun, and spiritum, or basically the soul magic, the goddess of death, Nyxara, and him had a battle that led to the devastation of the Burnt Isles, where everything was ruined. And in the end of the battle, Nyxara's body is buried underneath the catacombs, at which it sits and rests and leaks death. This death can then be channeled or basically evoked through use of careful magic that people can only access when they've had a severe injury or trauma that allows them to experience those threads of death that they can then maneuver and weave. Or they can basically slowly introduce agents into the body that allows them to feel death, which would be through poisonous plants like foxglove and belladonna. And these then, in slow, small doses, increase the length of life. Now, the problem is anytime you have too much of a good thing, you can actually end up altering the brain chemistry and such things, which can then lead to its own issues and problems, basically turning a living being into a form of stone. Now, the belief is that in order to wield the power of mortem, you must have been in a tragic injury or a near-death situation, at which point that mortem is then now visible and accessible to you. However, there's one character, our main female character, Lore, who is what is the word I'm looking for? The exception to the rule, where she is able to wield Mortem from her birth itself. We will get into more of this in just a second, but that is the premises of this world and the Foxglove King. Lore is the unbeholden, unwanting wielder of the power of death. Her original parents basically cast her out, and so she was adrift and taken in by two poison runners, Mari and Val, who end up being the parents that Lore has never had, and she grows in their safety. Now, they happen to be illegal poison runners that basically sell belladonna and all these other products in various market settings and profit off of this, and that's how they survive. Now, this is a criminal enterprise into which Lore has also been pushed into, and so she's just living her life when all of a sudden there is a raid that occurs while she is trying to do a poison run, and she's also a very talented spy. During this period of time, she basically gets captured and then brought to the prison of the king, the king of Sun. What are they actually called? The Averine Kingdom's Acronau family line, and in that family line there is the Sainted King. There we go. The Sainted King, who is believed to be the chosen descendants of Apuleius, the god of the sun, and Spiritum. And then we also have the priests, basically, and you have the exalted priest in the Press Mort system, and they are basically the ones that are able to channel the Mortem and basically hold it at bay so it cannot overspill into the land. When she gets captured by these people, they basically say, hey, there's been a threat on the kingdom, and we want you to come work for us and get close to my son, the prince, Bastian, in order to figure out whether he is plotting the demise of our kingdom and welcoming ruin and war to our doorstep. So that's the basic premises. We have magic systems that are in play. We have gods and goddesses that are kind of in play but have been forgotten by the rest of the world. We also have lower deities that are not as worshipped or as thought about outside of Apuleius and Nyxara, and everyone knows the renewal of the battle is coming and the god may come back. Also, we know that the Acronau line is the line that has been selected by Apuleius himself on his return to basically come and reunite the kingdoms. There's also saying that Nyxara herself is evil. This is what was foretold by Apuleius to the Press Mort, or the priests that have been created since the gods have disappeared and since Mortem, or the power of death, is leaking into the world unexpectedly, since the dead body of the goddess lies beneath the citadel. And through this entire process, basically, poor Lore finds herself in a bit of a pickle because she is found out to be the only one who can wield Mortem without need of help, and she's the only one that can still perform necromancy. She unwittingly gets pulled into a game within the court. We're working with Gabe, who also happens to be a priest who is now put back in court reluctantly. She has to play his cousin, and they are trying to get close to the Sainted Prince, who is Bastian, because the father, the Sainted King, believes that Bastian is actually a traitor. As the books continue and move forward, we realize that these three individuals are very, very intrinsically linked, and basically they are the ones that will, based on the decisions that they make and the way the books progress, we find out that their continued life and the choices that they make will basically lead to the awakening of the gods and basically the prophecies that have been foretold. So this is the first book, The Foxglove King. Let's just take a moment to appreciate how stunning this book is. It's honestly, I truly believe this is the most beautiful book I own in my entire collection. I mean, it's just so stunning. And then here are the beautiful, beautiful painted edges. So now we're going to get into a little bit of spoilers, because unfortunately in this book there's no way to avoid the spoilers. So if you have a rough idea now of what the series is about and you think you'd be interested in a magic system where basically a woman is forced into a role where she has to carry a burden of power that she never wanted, and all of the characters around her, all her friends, get sucked into the drama as well as a spicy little love triangle between the three main characters with very little spice actually discussed in the books themselves, and a fun, fast-paced in books 2 and 3 at least, storyline that's also politically driven. This is a great series for you. I definitely would recommend picking it up. I personally found the Foxglove King, the first book, to be a little bit on the slower side. So I will warn you on that. I would say that the book picks up closer to the later half of the series. And I think that's also because it really focuses on character development and world development in the beginning of the book. I will also say I read quite a few fantasy books, and I will say the first few chapters of this book did take me a second to grasp in order to understand the magic system that's actually occurring within this book. But basically, people who can channel death and people who have the power of death are kind of feared because it's believed that the goddess Nyxara was actually evil, and Apollonius, who is the god of Spiritum, his reign does not currently exist on the planet Earth since the god has fallen, and they're all waiting for his return. I would now kindly recommend clicking off if you don't want any spoilers. Auguste, who is the sainted king, and Anton, who is the priest that is the twin brother of the king, and basically the one who has prophecies told to him by Apollonius himself, are the ones who basically set the book in motion. Essentially, Augustus is actually just a jerk, and he just wants to hold on to power for as long as possible. The king is also slowly dying, but he's trying to ingest as many of these poisonous plants and stuff in small, concentrated doses that he can in order to prolong his life. It also happens to be around the time that his son, Bastian, who's another key player in this series, is about to become the next king. He is the prince, and on his consecration day, which is basically when they announce them to society, things like that. Basically, he's 24 years old, and in front of the congregation, when Anton, the high priest, cuts his hand as part of the process, we see the signs that Apollonius has chosen him as his vessel. So Anton, who's receiving all these prophecies from Apollonius, sees that Bastian is basically going to be the next king. However, Augustus wants to take on Bastian's power and remain the undisputed ruler, and he basically wants Apollonius to enter into him instead. During all of this background stuff that's happening, poor Laura and Gabe are basically forced into the court, and Anton, who has almost been like a father figure to Gabe since he was exiled from his hometown when it was brutally attacked when he was 10 years old, and when his father was deemed a traitor for letting in a Corinthian king. Gabe, unfortunately, at that time was also maimed beyond relief. His eye was essentially ripped out, and he's left alive by the cruel king, Jax of Corinthia, in order to be able to go back to the sainted king, or Averine, in order to serve out his days as a monk. So he and Anton have grown close. Gabe is also riddled with a lot of guilt and a lot of confusion as to where he stands. He doesn't feel safe being back in a court setting because he obviously comes from a traitorous line. And Lore is obviously forced into this role as well as basically his cousin. When they are found within the walls of the Citadel, it is very, very clear that people don't fully trust them, but they do want to get to know them. They're basically the points of gossip within the kingdom. We can also see that none of these kingdoms are truly rich. The poor are truly, truly poor. The rich don't really associate themselves with the poor, but they're not filthy rich either because there's not much to go around. Bastian himself is a wonderful, wonderful prince. He basically likes to run around and be a part of the people. He also goes under disguise to kind of figure out what's going on. He sees the confusion and the fear that is happening in this kingdom, and you also see the brink of war that's about to arrive at the kingdom's door. So he's doing everything in his power to figure out who the traitor is. When Lore and him inadvertently end up crossing hairs, Bastian realizes that Lore is more than what she seems. He realizes that she's able to channel Morton all on her own, and she's kind of the last living necromancer, which is a scary thing in and of itself, but he actually sees the beauty in her. Slowly there develops a romance between these two characters. Also, we see Lore and Gabe getting closer throughout the course of this book as well. Gabe and Bastian also have a shared history and past, where as children they used to be very, very close. And as adults, they share a very salty, like kind of bitter admiration and hatred of one another. So that's kind of like the rivalry that's going on, but it's essentially 3 points to a triangle. Now, these three characters are inadvertently linked. And the problem is, as Lore and Bastian realize that Lore has been sent to essentially see if Bastian is a traitor to his own kingdom, and Bastian and Lore discover that Auguste is actually the one who is evil and trying to start a war. And while he's dying, he's channeling all of his death back into the people and blaming it on the other kingdom. Gabe decides that his job is to essentially go and say to the priest, the high priest, that, hey, this is what's happening and I'm afraid of what this would entail. At the end of this book, we realize that Gabe realizes he was mistaken. Anton has been told by Apuleius that Lore must die in order for after the eclipse ceremony happens. As soon as Lore turns 24 and she gains her full power, she's to be wed to Bastion, she's supposed to be bonded to Bastion, so that Bastion, who is supposed to be the vessel for the god Apuleius, who is supposed to come back and bring peace to the world, when he returns to the body, after he gains Lore's power, Lore can be killed. Unfortunately, by the point this is also occurring, Bastion and Lore have already formed an attachment and he will not allow the death of Lore. Gabe is also heartbroken because he doesn't realize Lore needed to die, and Lore obviously is alive, and now there's a wedge between the two of them because she feels betrayed by Gabe. And that's kind of where the end of the first book falls to an end, and we now have a Lore who has been told that she's about to bring about the apocalypse if she continues to live, as she is the vessel for the goddess of death, as we find out later. And Bastion, who becomes the vessel for the god of light, are basically fighting for their life and essentially succeed. So Auguste and Anton are basically dethroned, and now Bastion's about to take that role on. We see the fracture of these three characters. We also see that all three of them are very, very fearful. They also act out of undying loyalty and love, but they don't always make the right decisions. They're extremely flawed characters, and now we've set the board for the supposed apocalypse that is coming, and it is believed that Apuleius is meant to be the only one alive and ruling. And now these two characters have gods in their head, and that's kind of where we leave off in the first book. That was a lot. I don't even know if that made sense. This book is one of those books where you have to read it to truly understand it. I feel like it kind of a lot happens in the first book, and like I said, it does move a little bit more slowly, but it's really setting up the world. And now we have two individuals that are touched by divinity unexpectedly. The Hemlock Queen is the second book in the series, and this is where we get to see who the true villain in the series is. Nixara almost becomes an inadvertent, a reluctant guide, if you will, to Lore, basically saying, I'm not going to take you over, but I'm also going to share as much information as possible to make you realize that Apuleius is not all he seems. So Apuleius, who's supposed to be the one true god who has now taken over Bastion, has decided that he is going to relish in his role and try to seek all the power possible, while simultaneously trying to pass it off that he is, the gift of God to the earth. As the book proceeds, though, we realize that Nixara and Apuleius are not true gods, and a lot of the story that has been woven around these characters and a lot of the religion that's been built around them, the idea that Apuleius is the shining god and he's going to bring back the best for humanity and he's going to find a restful, peaceful afterlife for them, is all a lie, because it turns out Nixara and Apuleius were actually human, and they stole divinity from the divine fount that actually carries all the magic of the world. As this is slowly relieved, we also see Bastion is slowly getting taken over by Apuleius, and he is slowly, essentially starting his push towards ruling everything. And we can actually see he's a ruler that's quite cruel and quite flawed. The problem is he's using Bastion's body to do it, who's now taken on the role of the Sainted King. So war is at their door. They don't know what's coming next. Bastion basically pushes for Lore to come support him, and Lore doesn't know fully whether she's dealing with the Bastion that she loves or she's dealing with the Apuleius who she has come to fear. Now, as both of them channel and use their powers of life and death, they start to realize that the gods in their head also become stronger and stronger, which is also how we get the history of how everything came to be in the first place. This book is basically then moving forward and also showing us that lower level divinity actually does serve a role, and it is important. And all of the other main role characters that surround Lore and Bastion start to realize that they also have some powers of the ocean, powers of air, powers of earth, powers of fire, all the elementals basically. And as they slowly find their powers as well, they realize that the entire story they've been told their whole life is no longer true. And now these guys have to decide how they're going to set the world back to the balance that it needs to be in, while simultaneously working with the divinity within that is trying to take over, while realizing that all of these divine beings that carry all of these powers are actually humans that were afraid to die, that ended up taking this divine power from the magical divine fount. And now they don't know what to do next. So throughout the course of this book, we see Bastion slowly becoming Apuleius. We see all the key players around Bastion that really wanted Apuleius to rise slowly started to suspect that something is wrong and start realizing that Apuleius is not all that he seems. Meanwhile, we have all the other characters trying to put everything into play so that they can bring Apuleius down and essentially rewrite the wrongs of their ancestors and give all the magic back to the fount. During the course of this book, we also understand that each of these individual characters are basically divine only for a short period of time. When the power was granted to them, the fount basically said, you may survive 2 deaths. The current death that is for your current form that has taken on these powers, which was their original roles as Apuleius, Nyxara, Hesterion, all of these characters. But once those characters die and those divine bodies die, they get one more birth. And that's why Gabe, Lore, Bastion, and all these other characters are so intrinsically linked, because they actually carry pieces of the memories of these gods within them. That is also what brings all of them together. So they were born as vessels for these divine entities. As all these pieces kind of fall into place and they start to realize that everything they've been told by the church is actually untrue because it's Apuleius's version of the truth and not the real truth, they start to try to figure out how to take Apuleius down and basically give all the powers back to the fountain. They realize there are broken pieces of the fountain that they have to gather. And throughout this book, we also see them traversing different islands. In this book, they also, they're not in different islands yet, actually. In this book, everything is still happening within the Citadel. And then by the end of this book, basically everyone finds themselves in a situation where they are now separated and forced into different areas, because at the end of this book, Apuleius has basically taken on hold of Bastion and he's not ready to let go. And so he's kind of calling the shots. And now all of our main characters have been scattered around and we don't know what's going to happen next. And it seems like everything is going to go horribly, horribly wrong because, of course, it's the second book in the series and that's how it has to end. And we know all of our good characters, the rebellious group, if you will, the resistance, if you will, is suffering as they're all pulled asunder and apart. In the final book, The Nightshade God, we are now in a position where the characters have, as I mentioned before, been divvied up. So we have Lore, who's on the Burnt Isles, is basically a prisoner. She's fighting for her life. She suddenly finds herself without the power of death because she has inadvertently given it back to the fount. She can no longer hear the goddess in her head at the same level that she used to. Meanwhile, we know that Apuleius is back and in control of Bastion. But as we get to read chapters from Bastion's perspective and view, we also realize that Apuleius isn't as strong as he once was, and he no longer has the same level of control over Bastion that he used to, which gives Bastion the ability to slowly return back to his body and gain control of himself once again. Of course, because Lore, Bastion, Malcolm, Gabe, and Allie, they're all separated, so none of them are really communicating this. Allie and Bastion are both found in court. Allie has just realized that she's also the half-sister of Bastion, which is part of the reason Apuleius wants to keep her alive. She is forced to be betrothed to the king, the Corinthian king, who was believed to be bringing war to the shores, but was actually being manipulated by Apuleius the whole time. And Jax, who is also a fervent servant of Bastion, or Apuleius in this case, realizes that the god is not everything he seems, and so he's also worried about Bastion's ascent to power. We also get introduced to the new lands in Caldone. What was it called again? 1 second, team, as I pull up the map. Chaldean. So we have Malcolm and Gabe in Chaldean, along with Val, Mari, and Michelle, and basically they are trying to figure out how to find broken pieces of the fountain. We have Lore on the Burnt Isles also trying to figure out how to escape and realizing that there's more magic here than one would have originally thought. And then we also have, of course, Bastion trying to prevent Allie from doing anything, but Allie also slowly making her moves as she tries to figure out where the buried piece of the fount is. Now, what are these buried pieces of the fount, you may ask? Well, they are pieces of the divine fountain that were broken off when these powers were stolen, and until the fountain is whole again, it can't receive its power back. So, how do they all figure out they have to do this? Well, as the divine individuals in each of these characters start to slowly awaken as the various characters use these powers, they realize that when they sleep, they are returned back to the memories of the gods that pre-existed them, and therefore they are returned back to the Burnt Isles before they became the Burnt Isles, but was rather the home of the gods, and they are able to communicate with each other in that way. By having these conversations in the Burnt Isles in their dream state, they are able to come up with plans and move chess pieces here and there. Now, the only problem with this is, of course, it's finicky because they're never going to sleep at the same time. So it's only happen chance that they ever get to meet each other and have these conversations, but they definitely start moving pieces into play so that they can plan for Apuleius's death. The other component of this is when the consecration occurred and when the powers of Apuleius and Nyxara were joined and when Lore was not murdered, Bastion loves Lore, but Apuleius also decides that he must own Lore because he believes that Nyxara is within her and he wants to be reunited with his love as well. Only Apuleius's idea of love is intense control. So as all of this is happening, we also realize that while Lore has lost her ability to hold death, she can still channel life. So basically, as Bastion is becoming more cognizant within his own body, it's because Lore is pulling threads of power from Apuleius unwittingly. Also, every time Bastion takes over Apuleius and says, hey, I'm going to take my body back, Apuleius is losing pieces of his power that's also going back to the fount. So as all of this is circulating and happening, Lore instinctually wants to hold on to her sense of power and her sense of life. And so because of this, she's gone searching for Apuleius's body so that she can kill his original body and therefore prepare for Apuleius's second death. The plan is also that all the characters are going to come together and give their powers back to the fount and thereby take down Apuleius. But of course, a lot of crazy things happen along the way. At this point, if I share any more information, I feel like I'm going to give away the story. And as you can see, this is already a very convoluted, very involved, very intense series. I feel like even as I talk about it, there's moments of this that probably sounds very confusing. So all I can say is it's a fun series. It's really interesting. As you can see, there's a lot of different layers to the various characters. There's a lot of different layers to the various political things that are happening. And if you're a fan of Star Wars, I really think you're going to like this series. That's the best way I can put it. But in a fantasy form, I think that this was such a fun series of reads. And I think that it was a very, very fascinating concept that was used in the magic system because it really centered around life and death, which I thought was really cool. And the book overall was just absolutely stunning. I think the writing was great. The story itself was very interesting. And I do think that all in all, it was a solid 4-star read series. The reason I say that is I did find the end of the Nightshade God slightly irritating, but I also feel like it was semi-realistic in the idea that it really, really showcases that divinity in and of itself cannot solve all problems because there is, of course, human free will to take under consideration. And the second thing is that when the divine creates, it does not take on the role of its creation. So it can't understand the level of emotions and feelings and fear and things like that that humans have, which is what makes Apuleius and his crew so dangerous because they obviously went for this divinity out of a sense of fear. And it makes the true divinity, the fountain, very callous in a way and not fully able to comprehend why people are acting the way they act. And it's really interesting to see the choices that the next generation makes because while Gabe, Bastion, and Lore, as well as the other characters, Allie, Malcolm, are being overwhelmed by divinity taking over their bodies, they still hold pieces of their own mind too. And so that was very interesting to see. I think the system within this book was just very well done. I think it was well written. I think it's a very intriguing series for sure. And I would definitely recommend it if that's the vibe of fantasy that you're looking for. I realize this video was all over the place and I do apologize for this. I think this series is just really difficult actually as I'm talking about it to summarize completely. just because of so many intricacies within it. But this does bring me to the end of the video, and I did want to say that I definitely loved every single one of these books. Every single one of them were a solid 4-star read for me. I think across the board, the systems were great. The book itself was great. I do feel like by the time you get to the second and third book, it is a little bit predictable. I also feel like there were points of the book that were dragged out. There were points of the book that were very fast. So that was a component of it that was frustrating to me. This is one of those series where I definitely found audiobooking and physically reading the book enhanced the experience for me. Because I really feel like you have to 100% put your attention into this book to fully understand the systems of what's going on, especially in the first book. But I do think the time invested is well paid off, and I do think the story is a fun read for sure. I definitely do see myself keeping these books on my shelves for years to come, and I do think if, like I said, you like, movies like Star Wars or Star Trek and things like that, I think you will truly enjoy this series as well. And that does bring us to the end of this video. If you guys sat through this and tried to parse and understand what I said, then I truly appreciate you for the efforts and the time spent. If you feel inspired to read these series, definitely let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts on what these books sounds like they hold within them, and your thoughts on the series as a whole, and whether it's something that you may want to pick up and read. Also, if you have read the series before and you have a better way of describing some of the events that happened, or if there were certain moments of the book that really stood out to you as plot twists and plot points, definitely leave your comments below, because I would love to know your thoughts on the books as well. This is a series that I definitely see myself pushing in the future for a book club or something like that, because I think it's a great series to discuss, and there's so much that's in there that can also pertain to our society today and the motivations that many people have to make the decisions that they do, as well as, the struggle between having unlimited power and thinking and knowing that you know best for so many different people, versus the reality that when you are truly a leader, there's so much at stake. I think it was definitely a high stakes book. I think the romance was very well done. I do feel like there was more plot and more story than there was spice, which is something that really spoke to me. And I did feel like the spice, when it did show up, was well placed. There's only 3 scenes in the entire book, and I think that was very, very well placed. And when I say in the entire book, I mean in the entire series, sorry. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. For those of you that are new here, thank you for being here. I do feel like most of my synopses are a little bit better than this one, and they are usually more firm in what I'm trying to say, but I do feel like there's just so much in this that it's a little bit different. I will leave other series reviews here though, in case you're interested in seeing any of my other ones. For those of you that are returning, thank you so much for being here. It means the absolute world to me. And as you know, I can't thank you enough for helping me build this bookish community. I truly appreciate each and every single one of you and your love for reading and your kindness and your support in this journey that I'm taking. And for those of you that are new, if you do want to be part of the community and you want to be part of the reading journey, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell. I put out videos every Wednesday and Sunday and would love to have you back. And I just want to leave everybody with, wherever you are, whether it be morning, evening, or night, and regardless of, the seas between us or the lands between us, I hope every single one of you is getting plenty of time to rest, relax, read, enjoy time with loved ones, and just getting necessary time for self-care. I think that's so important, and I wish you all love, and I wish you all happiness, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.